Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. Join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ideal Investor Show. And I'm not quite sure when you're actually going to listen to this. So maybe if you are an avid listener to our show, you might get this particular episode relatively shortly after Hurricane Helene hit basically Florida and Georgia and in Tennessee and those places. Or you might actually listen to it after Hurricane Milton hit Florida and Georgia and some of the other states. Why am I making that distinction? Well, because what we see right now, which is before Milton and after Helene, is something that I'm really, really concerned about, and I'm really kind of angry about, especially because I think it's something that should not happen. So what am I talking about? I find it is absolutely appalling that everything seems to get politicized these days. What do I mean? There are obviously certain organizations and certain individuals that the current government likes, and then there are others that the current government doesn't like. And that's their prerogative. They don't have to like everybody. But what I don't agree with is when we say we support those we like and we hamper those we don't like, even though it's not the people individually, it's companies that want to do something. Case in point, shortly after Hurricane Helene came on land in Florida, SpaceX launched one of their rockets with satellites and had a little mishap leading to the fact that part of the rocket landed in the ocean as planned, but not quite at the coordinate where they had originally said it would land. So it kind of landed a little bit out of the box somewhere in the water. Not hundreds or thousands of miles away, but a few miles away. The Federal Aviation Administration decided this is an anomaly and it requires an investigation, and until that investigation is completed, this type of rocket is no longer allowed to launch. About 3 days later, ULA, which stands for United Launch Alliance, which is basically a group made out of Lockheed Martin and Boeing, these two companies formed ULA, did the second test flight of their Vulcan rocket. And while the rocket was going up into the sky, one of the boosters clearly showed an explosion, and it looked like one of the engine nozzles either exploded or fell off or something like that. At least it was definitely an anomaly. Now the rocket kept going. The rocket basically delivered the payload. The payload got into orbit. The pieces of the rocket fell into the ocean just as planned. The Federal Aviation Administration published a note that said, yes, everybody who saw the video saw this little anomaly. We saw the anomaly too, but no public safety was compromised, so no investigation is necessary. Meaning, one case, SpaceX launches, there is an investigation required because the pieces of the rocket fell a few miles outside of the box in the water. ULA, obviously an organization the government likes, a rocket motor explodes during launch, no public safety, same like before with the other company, no investigation needed, they can just proceed. So you might say, okay, well, that's one thing, there's always an example of favoritism and so forth. Now let's go to Hurricane Helene, and if you hear this after Milton came on land, it might apply there as well. One of the problems that exists is if there's no power supply, then you also don't have cell phones. Because all these little cell phone antennas that actually send you the signal, they all need power. And as you know, when a hurricane comes on land, power is typically one of the first things that goes out, because in the United States, we have for the last 250 years refused to put our power line into the ground. We're still stringing along wooden masts, knowing that there are 150-mile-an-hour winds coming in every year a few times. When the power goes out, the hurricane comes by. When the hurricane is gone, we string the lines again on the wooden poles. And then we are surprised when the next one comes in and a couple million people are again out of power, including cell phone services. So people cannot ask for help. They cannot call an ambulance. They cannot get in touch with the emergency services. What would be a solution? Well, one solution is Starlink, which is satellite internet, and it only needs a little bit of battery power or a generator or something like that, an electric car. You can use all kinds of things to power the Starlink antenna. And as soon as you have that, you can be connected to the world again. So when Helene came through and devastated power for 3 million people, besides all the damage, SpaceX said, we're sending you as many Starlink terminals as we can. Now, in emergency cases, FEMA, another government agency, is in charge. They suddenly started prohibiting Starlink terminals to be delivered to people in need because there were no previous applications and there were no previous transportation agreements and no logistics agreements and whatever kind of argument you could make. SpaceX is obviously not in favorable light with the government, and the government, even when people are suffering, even when people have no cell phone, even when people are dying to the tune of probably in the end 200 people being dead after Helene, it's politically more opportune to make sure the company understands that they are not in favor than actually helping people. If you say, okay, well, that's inside the country and this is favoritism and that might not be nice, but we understand. Well, how about electric cars? When GM, at the end of the Bush administration, got into trouble because the whole economy was in trouble, GM declared bankruptcy. Normally, when a company declares bankruptcy, that's it, they're done. Well, you all know GM is still around. How was that possible? Well, the Obama administration spent billions of dollars to get GM to come back. They just gave the money to the company that just went bankrupt. If you ask me what is the definition of that, I would say that's a government subsidy. And oh, by the way, GM never repaid the money. They took the money from the government and they restarted operations as if somebody wiped out their debt. To me, this is clearly government subsidies. Now, just the other day, the US government announced that there are new tariffs that make a Chinese electric car twice as expensive as the sales price. And why? Because the US government says the Chinese government gave their electric car companies subsidies. And we don't want that. And we don't allow that. And so a $20,000 Chinese electric car needs now to cost $40,000. Where are those $20,000 extra go? They go into the taxpayer's IRS account. You buying a car that you could have bought for $20,000 or $25,000 is now going to cost you $40,000 or $50,000, and half of that money goes to the US government because they're saying we can subsidize a bankrupt GM to come back to life, but when another country subsidizes their automakers, that's not okay. That's a threat to us. And therefore, we have to do everything possible, including 100% tariffs, to keep him out of our market. Now, if you had two vehicles with completely the same capabilities, and the one costs you $25,000, the other one costs you $45,000, which one do you buy? Well, you would buy the cheaper one. I would. And I think you would too. So what has the government done? It hasn't said, okay, buy the GM that you can get for $25,000, and we make the Chinese one artificially expensive at $40,000. They're basically saying the only one that could make a car like that for $20,000 or $25,000 are the Chinese. We are currently not capable. So you, the customer, are being basically not allowed to buy that car that would be available to you for $20,000 or $25,000, and you cannot buy anything like it anywhere else either. So if you were interested to do something for the environment, because all the studies clearly show that by having an electric vehicle, as soon as you start operating it for a year or two, is better for the environment than any gas-powered car. You cannot do that for an affordable price because the government says, no, we don't like these external companies. We are subsidizing our own when it's opportune, but if other governments do that, it's not allowed. So these are three examples, and I wanted to bring them to your attention because one thing you have to ask yourself is, how much longer are you going to be okay with everything being politicized? And how soon will we get to a point where the government is basically dictating what we can buy, what we can have, what we can spend our money on? rather than us making free decisions? And I think that is really the big question that we're going towards. The argument is always national security and protecting our workers and protecting our industry, but the end result is our industry cannot make a $25,000 electric car. Other countries can, and our government says, well, they can, but we're not going to give our people the opportunity to buy them. And I would love to hear in the comments to this episode if you're okay with that. And if you are, please explain to me why. So that's it for today. Be well and stay safe, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.